Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through, well, all sorts of information, articles, research, videos to pull out those key insights, getting you up to speed, fast. Today we're jumping into an idea that's genuinely provocative, maybe even a bit disorienting when you first hear it. We're going to explore how something usually seen as, the ultimate threat could actually may lead to more stability. The big question is, could Iran getting a nuclear weapon actually make the world safer? I know it sounds kind of crazy on the surface.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, our main source is a YouTube video. It's called Iran's Next Move Could Shock the World from the channel Cyrus Jansen. And this video, it really pushes back against a lot of the mainstream narratives you hear about Iran. It focuses heavily on deterrence and, well, the whole power dynamic in the region.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. We're going to walk through the arguments and the evidence presented in this source, however unconventional they might seem. Just to be clear, our goal here is simply to understand this viewpoint thoroughly, presenting it neutrally so you can make up your own mind. So the source kicks things off with this central argument that's, frankly, pretty stunning. Western politicians, the media, they often frame Iran going for nuclear weapons as the absolute biggest threat out there. But this analysis claims the opposite, that it could actually make the region safer, maybe even help global stability. How on earth could that be the case?
Well, the video really grounds this whole idea in the concept of deterrence, specifically mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The source points out this is basically seen as the only reason the U.S. and the Soviet Union didn't actually go to war during the Cold War, despite all that tension. MAD creates this lose-lose situation, right? If you strike first, you guarantee your own destruction. So it kind of prevents the conflict from starting.
And here's where it gets really specific to the region. According to the source, it highlights that Israel currently has an estimated 90 nuclear warheads. And this arsenal, the video argues, gives Israel a completely disproportionate advantage. It lets them act, quote, without any consequences.
Exactly. And this advantage, the source contends, is used to chase a very specific goal. It claims Israel is actively fighting for regime change in Iran, and that this has been like the main focus of Israeli foreign policy for the last 3 decades. Going deeper, the video asserts the current Israeli government believes that the majority of the land in the region was promised to them by God.
Mhm.
And this belief, the source says, leads to these open calls for expanding Israel's borders to what's referred to as Greater Israel, which is, a concept from religious texts covering a much larger area, including parts of Egypt and Syria today.
Wow. And the video draws this really striking comparison here. It likens this expansionist desire to fascist regimes in the past, citing examples like Hitler's push for Lebensraum or Mussolini wanting a new Roman Empire, but it makes a distinction.
Right. It says that the Israeli ultra-Zionists, as the source calls them, use a theocratic approach, not necessarily a racial one, like those historical examples. And to achieve this perceived divine destiny, the source explains, Israel feels it has to remove any obstacles to destabilize basically every other government in the region. But, and this is a key point in the video, with only about 9 million people, Israel cannot do this alone.
Right. Okay. And that's where the U.S. comes into the picture, according to this source. It claims that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, dominates U.S. politics, essentially buying the loyalty of most U.S. politicians. The video even gives examples, like politicians wearing Israeli military uniforms or openly prioritizing Israel's interests, cites Ted Cruz wanting to be the leading defender of Israel in the Senate.
And this political capture, as the source terms it, has led to massive financial support. Over $305 billion in U.S. aid since 1951, apparently. The video then brings up an alleged memo from General Wesley Clark, supposedly from the Secretary of Defense's office, describing a plan to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing with Iran.
And, well, the source makes this chilling claim that almost all of those countries have been neutralized since then. Iraq based on the WMD lie, Libya bombed by NATO, now a failed state, terrible situation there. Somalia, still a failed state. Sudan, civil war. Syria, destabilized with U.S. and Israeli backing, it says. Hezbollah and Lebanon, largely incapacitated.
So shifting focus to Iran itself, the source talks about its history of, well, independence from direct U.S. control, which hasn't been smooth. It starts with the 1953 coup, overthrowing Prime Minister Mossadegh right after he nationalized Iran's oil. The U.S. installed the Shah, who ruled until the '79 Islamic Revolution. And since that revolution, the source says the U.S. has hit Iran with really tough sanctions, which it argues have devastated Iran's currency and made it hard to import critical things, even life-saving medicine.
But despite all that pressure, The source really emphasizes Iran's remarkable resilience.
Hmm.
It paints a picture of a country becoming largely self-sufficient, developing its own products, and actively looking for alternatives to Western partnerships like, China's Belt and Road joining BRICS.
So from this viewpoint, Iran is seen as the largest and last remaining obstacle to Israel's total dominance. It highlights Iran's strong criticism of Israel and how it arms resistance groups in places like Palestine, Yemen, and Lebanon.
And the source argues there was this big miscalculation by Israeli and U.S. intelligence, believing Iran was just about to collapse, just needed a slight push for regime change. But instead, the video suggests these attacks and the pressure just emboldened the Iranian people, made them rally more behind their government.
Then the source shares some, well, surprising details about modern Iran, citing viral social media footage showing modern streets, ladies walking around scarfless or with a scarf on their shoulders. And statistics like nearly 70% of science and engineering grads now being women, and women making up 70% of medical students, things you might not expect.
Yeah, that's interesting context. And the video also recounts Iran's big missile assault on Israel. Lasted 2 weeks, apparently. This was in response to what Iran called illegal attacks. And these strikes, the source claims, actually revealed the failure of Israel's Iron Dome system and caused significant damage.
Okay, so to really hammer home this idea about nuclear deterrence, the source uses 2 case studies, real-world examples.
Right. Let's start with Libya under Gaddafi. The source describes Libya back then as having the highest quality of life in all of Africa, because Gaddafi apparently redistributed oil wealth for universities, healthcare, electricity.
Yeah, and the video explains Gaddafi actually started a nuclear program to try and guarantee Libya's independence, but then in 2003, he abandoned it, gave it up, and the source calls this a fatal mistake, claiming it led directly to his violent death, and Libya becoming a failed state after that 2011 NATO bombing. The source mentions those open-air slave markets, the argument being no nukes, no protection.
Okay, pretty grim picture. Now, contrast that with North Korea, which the source says the U.S. government has basically left alone over the years, relatively speaking.
Right. The video argues the U.S. cannot engage with North Korea in the same way it did with Libya. Why? Because North Korea has the ability to respond proportionally. It has nukes. So instead, the U.S. focuses on strangling it economically with sanctions. And the source uses this as proof positive. The nuclear deterrent has kept it alive.
So this really brings up a fundamental question, which the source asks directly. What makes a country qualified to have a nuclear weapon? And it then turns quite critical of the U.S. and Israel, calling them objectively warmongers. Strong language there.
Yeah, it makes some very strong claims. It details that Israel, since October 7th, 2023, has carried out more than 17,000 attacks across 5 countries, that it's approaching 2 years of committing genocide against the Palestinian people, that's the source's framing, and that it launched an illegal first strike on Iran. It also points out that Israel is one of only 4 countries, India, Pakistan, South Sudan being the others that have refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, and that Israel does not cooperate with the IAEA, the International Nuclear Watchdog, refusing inspectors access to its secret nuclear sites.
Okay, so that's the picture painted of Israel. Then it contrasts this sharply with Iran. The source states Iran has never initiated war, is a member of both the NPT and the IAEA, and has passed frequent and thorough inspections. Plus, it notes Iran stuck to the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, until the U.S. pulled out unilaterally.
Right. So this perspective portrays Iran as a consistently rational actor. It gives examples. Iran's response to the U.S. assassination of General Soleimani in 2020, and also a bombing of Iranian nuclear sites in June 2025 mentioned in the source. In both cases, Iran apparently warned the U.S. beforehand and deliberately targeted empty land, demonstrating, the source argues, calculated restraint.
So given all that context presented in the video, the conclusion it draws is that Iran has every motivation to acquire a nuclear weapon. But crucially, not for a first strike, which would mean complete annihilation for everyone, but purely to deter further aggression from Israel and the U.S.
And then the video brings in this almost philosophical idea. Every accusation is a confession, suggesting that the criticisms often leveled at Iran actually, ironically, describe Israel better, according to this source.
Can you give examples of that?
Sure. So the source counters. Iran is painted as a theocratic regime, but it argues Israel is run by a fanatical theocratic government. Iran is seen as the main cause of instability, but this analysis claims Israel is undoubtedly the largest destabilizing force. And Iran gets labeled a state sponsor of terrorism, but the video asserts Israel has sponsored numerous terrorist attacks. It mentions specific alleged incidents like detonating explosive pagers and radios in public markets, killing children, and setting off car bombs in Iran. So, wrapping up this section, the source's view is clear. Iran pursuing a nuclear deterrent isn't aggression. It's presented as a rational response to very real systematic threats.
Okay, so stepping back, what does all this mean? This deep dive into the Cyrus Janssen video presents this really challenging, maybe uncomfortable argument that an Iranian nuclear deterrent, far from being the ultimate nightmare, could actually be the key to a more stable, more secure future, not just for Iran, but maybe for the whole region.
Yeah, it's a perspective that, if you accept its premises, suggests the way forward isn't more pressure, but maybe recognizing Iran's security concerns, moving towards a more balanced, peaceful approach in the Middle East.
So it definitely leaves you with something to think about. Given these case studies, Libya versus North Korea, and the arguments about rationality and deterrence, if MAD is the most effective way to guarantee sovereignty in, let's face it, an imperfect world, what does that really imply for global nuclear policy? And, the future of how nations deal with each other, definitely something to ponder.